Hollywood's golden age had a dark secret buried beneath the glittering marquees and studio lot smiles. The 1930s gave us some of the most beloved child stars in cinema history, but behind those angelic faces and dimpled grins lay a sinister truth that would haunt an entire generation. What happens when the cameras stop rolling and the spotlight fades? Can you imagine discovering that your childhood heroes met endings more tragic than any script Hollywood ever wrote? Some stories are too heartbreaking to be fiction. Scotty Beckett. Picture this. It's 1934, and a 6-year-old boy with tousled hair and an infectious smile is stealing scenes in Our Gang comedies. That boy was Scotty Beckett, and for a brief, shining moment, he was America's sweetheart. His signature look, that crooked cap, oversized sweater, and mischievous grin, made him the poster child for Depression-era innocence. But Hollywood has a way of chewing up its darlings and spitting them out, and Scotty's story is a masterclass in how fame can become a prison. By the time he portrayed young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story in 1946, critics were calling his performance heartfelt and strikingly believable. The kid had talent, real talent, not just cute factor. But here's the cruel irony of child stardom. The very thing that makes you famous becomes the thing that destroys you. As Scotty grew older, Hollywood's golden boy discovered that the industry only wanted him frozen in time, forever 6 years old with that same innocent smile. The transition from child to adult roles? Forget about it. Casting directors couldn't see past the freckled face they remembered from Our Gang. The offers dried up faster than a desert creek, and Scotty found himself in that all-too-familiar Hollywood limbo, too old for kid roles, too typecast for adult ones. That's when the real tragedy began. Alcohol became his escape, then drugs followed. Legal troubles piled up like a house of cards. Drunk driving, drug possession, forgery, even assault. In 1954, he led police on a high-speed chase that ended with him crashing his car and attempting to flee on foot. The promising young actor had become another cautionary tale, but this one was just getting started. By the late 1950s, his career was in ruins. He made multiple attempts to claw his way back, each effort ending in heartbreak. Some say he tried to reinvent himself, to shed the Our Gang image that had become his curse. But Hollywood has a long memory for success, and an even longer one for failure. Then came July 10th, 1968. Scotty Beckett was found lifeless in a Los Angeles motel room, the victim of a barbiturate overdose. The official ruling? Accidental death. But those who knew him wondered if it was really an accident at all. At just 38 years old, the boy who once made America laugh had become another statistic in Hollywood's graveyard of broken dreams. For those who remember Our Gang, or The Jolson Story, Scotty Beckett remains frozen in time, the bright-eyed boy with the winning smile, long before the industry and his own demons took their toll. Baby Leroy meet Baby Leroy, the child star who made grown men weep and W.C. Fields plot murder, literally. Born Leroy Overacker. In 1932, this curly-haired cherub became one of the most unlikely superstars of the 1930s. We're talking about a kid who couldn't even walk properly when he signed his first contract, yet somehow managed to upstage some of Hollywood's biggest names. But here's the kicker. His story isn't just about early fame, it's about what happens when that fame becomes a family curse. Baby Leroy's rise was meteoric. By age 1, he was already stealing scenes in A Bedtime Story with Maurice Chevalier. By 2, he was commanding top billing and earning more money than most adults during the Great Depression. The kid had something special, a natural charisma that translated beautifully on screen. Directors loved him because he was unpredictable, genuine, and completely unaware of the cameras rolling around him. But here's where things get dark. W.C. Fields, the legendary comedian who co-starred with Baby Leroy in several films, reportedly hated working with the toddler. Fields once allegedly spiked the baby's milk with gin during filming, causing the child to sleep through an entire day's shoot. When asked about it later, Fields supposedly quipped, "The kid's no trooper." It was Hollywood's idea of a practical joke, but imagine the horror of drugging a 2-year-old for a laugh. The real tragedy wasn't Fields' alleged prank. It was what happened when Baby Leroy's usefulness expired. Child stars have a built-in expiration date, and Baby Leroy hit his around age 4. Suddenly, the toddler who could command $1,500 per week was unemployed. The industry that had worshipped his every gurgle and giggle moved on without a backward glance. His parents, who had built their lives around their son's earnings, watched helplessly as their golden goose stopped laying eggs. The family's financial stability crumbled overnight. Unlike other child stars who could at least try to transition to adult roles, baby Leroy was too young to have developed any real acting skills. He'd simply been himself on camera. The aftermath was devastating. The family moved away from Hollywood, trying to rebuild their lives away from the spotlight. Baby Leroy, now just plain Leroy Overacker, grew up in relative obscurity, but the damage was done. He died in 2001 at age 69, largely forgotten by the industry that had once celebrated his every move. His story serves as a chilling reminder that in Hollywood's golden age, even babies weren't safe from exploitation and abandonment. Jackie Kugan. Here's a story that'll make your blood boil. Imagine earning $70 million as a child. That's about $1 billion in today's money, only to discover that your own parents spent every last penny while you were busy being America's sweetheart. Meet Jackie Kugan, the kid who made Charlie Chaplin cry and then got financially destroyed by the two people who were supposed to protect him most. In 1921, at just 7 years old, Jackie starred alongside Charlie Chaplin in The Kid, a film that would make him the most famous child actor in the world. We're talking about a level of fame that would make today's social media influencers weep with envy. By age 10, he was earning more money per week than most adults made in a year. His cherubic face and genuine acting ability made him a box office goldmine, and Hollywood couldn't get enough. But here's where the fairy tale turns into a nightmare. While Jackie was busy being adorable on screen, his parents were living it up like royalty. Expensive cars, lavish parties, designer clothes. They spent his money faster than he could earn it. The kid was making millions, but he was given a $6 a day allowance and told to be grateful for it. His parents justified their spending with the cold logic of the era. Every dollar a kid earns before he is 21 belongs to his parents. When Jackie turned 21 in 1935, he expected to inherit his fortune. Instead, he discovered that his parents had blown through practically everything. The $4 million he'd earned, gone. His mother and stepfather had the audacity to tell him that raising him had been expensive and that he should be thankful for the investment they'd made in his career. Can you imagine the betrayal? Jackie did what any sane person would do. He sued his own parents. The 1938 lawsuit became a media sensation, exposing the dark underbelly of child stardom for all to see. The court case was brutal, with his mother claiming she deserved the money because she'd sacrificed her own career to manage his. Jackie won the lawsuit, but the victory was Pyrrhic. There was almost nothing left to recover. The real tragedy? Jackie's story was so shocking that it actually changed the law. The Kugan law, enacted in 1939, now requires that a portion of child actors' earnings be set aside in protected accounts. Jackie became the poster child for exploitation, but his sacrifice paved the way for future generations of child stars to have some protection from their own families. He eventually found fame again as Uncle Fester in The Addams Family, but the scars of his childhood betrayal never fully healed. Shirley Temple. She was the most famous child in America, the dimpled angel who danced and sang her way through the Great Depression, giving hope to millions. But Shirley Temple's story has a dark twist that perfectly illustrates how even the biggest stars weren't safe from financial ruin. When America's sweetheart asked her father about her money, she discovered that being the world's most beloved child star didn't guarantee financial security. Shirley Temple wasn't just famous, she was a cultural phenomenon. At the height of her career in the mid-1930s, she was earning $10,000 per week, an astronomical sum during the Depression. Her movies single-handedly saved 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy, and her merchandise deals were worth millions. She had her own line of dolls, dresses, and even a non-alcoholic cocktail named after her. This wasn't just child stardom. This was a one-girl economic empire. But here's the kicker. While Shirley was busy saving Hollywood studios and lifting America's spirits, her parents were doing their best to manage the fortune she was generating. The key word here is trying. Unlike Jackie Kugan's parents, who maliciously squandered their son's earnings, Shirley's father genuinely attempted to invest her money wisely. Unfortunately, good intentions don't always translate to good results. The crushing revelation came when Shirley was 22 years old. When she asked her father how much money was in her bank account, he informed her that only $44,000 was left of the approximately $3.4 million she had made as a child star. $3.4 million gone. The investments had failed, the stock market had crashed, and the depression that her movies had helped Americans forget had devoured her fortune, just like everyone else's. What makes Shirley's story different from other child stars is her reaction. She didn't sue her parents, didn't spiral into addiction, didn't become another Hollywood tragedy. Instead, she dusted herself off and reinvented herself entirely. She got married, had children, and eventually became a diplomat, serving as U.S. ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia. She took her financial ruin and transformed it into a lesson about resilience. But think about the injustice of it all. This was a child who had carried an entire film studio on her tiny shoulders, who had brought joy to millions during America's darkest economic period, and who had earned enough money to set up generations of her family for life. Yet she entered adulthood with less money than many middle-class families had in their savings accounts. Shirley Temple's story proves that even when parents have the best intentions, the system was still rigged against child stars. The industry took their innocence, their childhoods, and yes, their money too. Freddy Bartholomew. Picture this. A 10-year-old English boy with perfect manners and an aristocratic accent becomes one of Hollywood's biggest stars practically overnight. Freddy Bartholomew was the child actor who made American audiences swoon with his portrayal of Little Lord Fauntleroy in 1936, but his real-life story reads like a Dickens novel, complete with family betrayal, legal battles, and a heartbreaking fall from grace. Freddy wasn't just any child actor, he was MGM's golden boy, the studio's answer to Shirley Temple. His refined English accent and natural acting ability made him perfect for prestige pictures. He starred in classics like David Copperfield and Captains Courageous, working alongside Hollywood legends like Spencer Tracy. By age 12, he was earning $1,000 per week, serious money during the Depression era. But here's where his story takes a dark turn that makes other child star tales look like fairy tales. Freddy's success triggered a vicious custody battle that would make today's celebrity divorce proceedings look civilized. His biological parents, who had given him up to his Aunt Millicent when he was a baby, suddenly decided they wanted him back, along with the fortune he was earning. The legal battle was brutal, playing out in newspapers across America, while Freddy continued working, trying to maintain his professional smile, while his personal life imploded. The aunt who had raised him and brought him to Hollywood, she was fighting tooth and nail to keep custody, not out of love, but because she controlled his earnings. His biological parents were making their own grab for his money. Meanwhile, Freddy was caught in the middle, a child whose value was measured purely in dollars and cents. The court case dragged on for years, with lawyers eating up a significant portion of his earnings. When Freddy finally came of age and tried to claim his fortune, he discovered what so many child stars learned the hard way. The money was gone. Legal fees, family squabbles, and poor management had depleted his earnings. The refined English boy who had once been Hollywood royalty found himself starting adulthood with virtually nothing. The transition to adult roles proved impossible. Audiences couldn't see past the well-mannered child they remembered, and his English accent, once his greatest asset, became a liability as American tastes changed. He tried to reinvent himself in television and theater, but the magic was gone. The boy who had once commanded top billing was reduced to small parts and guest appearances. Freddy Bartholomew's story is a masterclass in how the entertainment industry chews up and spits out its young stars. He had talent, charm, and work ethic, but none of that mattered when the adults around him failed to protect his interests. His childhood was sacrificed on the altar of entertainment, and his fortune vanished into the pockets of lawyers and family members who saw him as a commodity rather than a child. Jane Withers. While other child stars were getting financially destroyed by their parents in the studio system, Jane Withers was quietly playing the game better than anyone else. She was the antithesis of Shirley Temple, bratty, mischievous, and unapologetically difficult. But that attitude might have been exactly what saved her from the tragic fate that befell so many of her contemporaries. Jane burst onto the scene in 1935 as the obnoxious rich girl who tormented Shirley Temple in Bright Eyes. Audiences were supposed to hate her, but something unexpected happened. They fell in love with her bratty charm. Fox Studios recognized they had struck gold and quickly built an entire franchise around her rebellious persona. She became the bad girl to Shirley's good girl, and it worked brilliantly. But here's what made Jane different from every other child star of the era. She had a mother who was actually looking out for her interests. While other stage mothers were spending their children's money on fur coats and fancy cars, Ruth Withers was making sure Jane's earnings were invested wisely. She negotiated contracts that included profit sharing, merchandising deals, and most importantly, protected trust funds that couldn't be touched by anyone. Jane's characters were rebels, and in real life, she was just as defiant. She refused to be molded into Hollywood's idea of what a child star should be. When other kids were being dressed up like little dolls and told to smile pretty, Jane was throwing tantrums, making demands, and generally being a pain in the studio's collective ass. And you know what? It worked. Her difficult reputation actually protected her because it meant the studio couldn't completely control her. The irony is delicious. While sweet, compliant child stars were being exploited and financially ruined, the difficult kid was building a fortune that would last her entire life. Jane understood something that other child stars didn't, that being liked by the adults around you wasn't as important as being respected and feared. When Jane reached adulthood, she did something revolutionary. She retired from acting on her own terms. She didn't wait for Hollywood to discard her. She walked away while she was still successful. She got married, had children, and lived off her wisely invested earnings. Later, she made a comeback as the Josephine the Plumber in Comet Cleanser commercials, proving that she could reinvent herself without losing her financial security. Jane Withers lived to be 95 years old, dying in 2021 as one of the last surviving stars of Hollywood's golden age. Her story proves that sometimes being the difficult kid was actually the smartest career move a child star could make. While her contemporaries were getting chewed up by the system, Jane was busy gaming it. She remains one of the few child stars who actually beat Hollywood at its own game, and she did it by refusing to play by their rules. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was the energetic, eternally youthful face of American optimism during the 1930s and 1940s. At 5 feet 2 inches with a baby face that seemed immune to aging, he was Hollywood's perpetual teenager, starring in the Andy Hardy film series that made him one of the biggest box office draws of his era. But Mickey's story is a cautionary tale about what happens when the industry and the world refuse to let you grow up. Starting his career at age 6 in vaudeville, Mickey was already a seasoned performer by the time he hit Hollywood. His breakthrough came with the Andy Hardy series, where he played the all-American boy next door dealing with typical teenage problems. The films were massive hits, and Mickey became the highest-paid actor in Hollywood by age 19. He was earning $5,000 per week at MGM, a fortune that should have set him up for life. But here's the cruel irony. Mickey's success was built on playing a character who never aged, and Hollywood expected him to stay frozen in time forever. When he tried to transition to more mature roles, audiences rejected him. They wanted Andy Hardy, not Mickey Rooney the adult. The same youthful appearance that made him a star became his prison. Casting directors couldn't see past the teenager they remembered, even when Mickey was well into his 20s. The financial mismanagement that plagued so many child stars hit Mickey hard. Despite earning millions during his peak years, he found himself broke by the 1960s. Bad investments, expensive divorces, he was married 8 times, and the simple fact that he never learned to manage money as an adult left him financially devastated. The kid who had once been Hollywood's highest-paid actor was performing in dinner theaters and taking any work he could get. Mickey's personal life was a mess of failed relationships and financial disasters. He had been famous for so long that he never learned how to be a regular person. The spotlight was both his drug and his poison. He needed it to feel alive, but it also destroyed his ability to form lasting relationships or make sound financial decisions. The saddest part? Mickey kept working until he died at age 93 in 2014, not because he loved acting, but because he had to. He never achieved the financial security that should have come with his early success. His final years were marked by elder abuse allegations, suggesting that even in his 90s, people were still trying to exploit the eternal teenager who had never learned to protect himself. Mickey Rooney's story proves that sometimes the biggest tragedy isn't dying young. It's living too long in an industry that refuses to let you grow up. Margaret OBrien. Margaret OBrien had a gift that made grown men weep and studio executives see dollar signs. She could cry on command. Not just any tears, but heart-wrenching, soul-crushing sobs that felt absolutely genuine because they were. At age 7, she won a Special Academy Award for her performance in Meet Me in St. Louis. But the price of that Oscar was higher than anyone realized at the time. Margaret wasn't just acting. She was being emotionally manipulated by directors who understood that her tears were box office gold. They would tell her devastating stories about her pets dying or her parents abandoning her, anything to get those authentic tears flowing. Imagine being a child and having adults deliberately break your heart over and over again, all so they could capture your genuine anguish on film. The little girl who made audiences sob in Meet Me in St. Louis and Our Vines Have Tender Grapes was living a nightmare between takes. Directors would keep her isolated from other children, telling her that her parents didn't love her anymore if she didn't cry, convincingly enough. The emotional abuse was systematic and calculated, designed to keep her in a perpetual state of vulnerability that translated beautifully on screen. But here's the truly sick part. Margaret's tears weren't just making great cinema, they were making everyone around her rich. Her mother received a percentage of her earnings, the studio was making millions, and Margaret was being praised for her natural talent, when what she was really displaying was a trauma response. The industry was literally profiting from a child's emotional breakdown, and everyone pretended it was art. As Margaret grew older, the demand for her tears dried up. Audiences didn't want to see a teenager cry. They wanted the vulnerable little girl who had tugged at their heartstrings. By age 12, her career was essentially over. The studios had wrung every profitable tear from her and moved on to the next emotionally exploitable child. The transition to adult life was brutal. Margaret had spent her formative years being told that her only value was her ability to cry convincingly. She struggled with identity issues, wondering who she was when she wasn't performing trauma for cameras. The emotional manipulation she had endured as a child left lasting scars that affected her relationships and self-worth for decades. Margaret OBrien's story exposes one of Hollywood's most disturbing practices, the deliberate psychological manipulation of children for entertainment purposes. She wasn't just a child star. She was a victim of systematic emotional abuse that happened to produce award-winning performances. Her tears were real, her pain was genuine, and Hollywood profited from every drop while pretending it was just good acting. These weren't just statistics or cautionary tales. They were real children whose lives were sacrificed on the altar of entertainment. The 1930s gave us magical movies, but the cost was measured in broken dreams and shattered innocence. Think about it. How many more stories like these are buried in Hollywood's archives? Drop a comment with your thoughts, hit that subscribe button, and remember, behind every golden age lies a shadow that's much darker than we'd like to admit.